for LSU Sports and getting the first question always. You're on a heater right now. How? No, not even how. My question is, you've had the last couple first questions with Brian Kelly, then you hit the first question
with Frank,
new presser. So, how has the vibe been around everybody? Because look, once Brian Kelly gets fired, which we've talked about, then everybody comes out and they end up there. It's a lot easier to be vocal when the guy's no longer there than when he's there, right? You don't want to say anything when the guy's there. So you're hearing stories. You're hearing how he was running the program. You're hearing a bunch of different things. You heard from in the presser today from Frank Wilson that Blake Baker asked Frank Wilson to give him a more realistic look on what they were going to see in the game this weekend against Alabama. That leads me to believe that they had not been doing that in the past. What has been the collective vibe from your experience in covering this over the last week?
Well, first off, and I like how you guys kind of led off the show with how long has it been? I mean, it feels like it's been a month we've been talking about this.
Exactly.
With the amount of content that's been produced. It's crazy. It's 1 week. And then on top of that, you have Hugh Freeze get fired. So it's like Brian Kelly's put on the back burner.
Correct.
Hugh Freeze is in the media cycle right now. But, no, to your point, I think I would say the biggest vibe is a lot of LSU players, and the days are getting mixed up right now, but I guess it was like last Wednesday, when the former LSU players made their way to practice, and that was really made a big deal by the social media team. If you really want to get a vibe check, football social media teams are a really good thing to look at. People draw a lot of information from that, and I think with the way that they broadcasted the former players speaking and highlighted. I know Jacob Hester was one that they showed what he said, Matt Flynn as well, and a couple other guys, and even Verge Osbury. Well, they highlighted what he said to the team. Like, that shows you, I think, a little bit behind the curtain of what they're trying to push as a brand, right? Like what they want to push, and that's the big thing, is reconnecting with the alumni, getting back to what LSU is. That's been the big topic of conversation for the last week, and they're trying to get out ahead of that. So that'll be the biggest thing. And then kind of with what Frank Wilson said today, right, that Thursdays, and I tweeted it, I can't remember what he called it, but Thursdays they're going to have alumni, it sounds like, each Thursday. Huddle up, yeah. They're going to have that and invite people back to the program. And, I think that's something interesting because I don't know if you could do that if you were in the middle of a playoff push. So I don't want to get on Brian Kelly and him. Like, he wouldn't have – I don't think he did that anyways, but I don't think you would do that now. And with LSU in the position that they're in, and Frank Wilson, probably would love to have the head coaching job, and knowing that's probably not likely, it's just something he can do to not just mend the relationships, but also to prove to the next head coach, if it does come from the outside and not an LSU guy, that he's still needed and valuable. So when that head coach sits down with the powers that be, say, hey, Frank Wilson did a lot to stabilize. We need to keep him around again, which I think anyone and everyone would be a fan of. So that's kind of the big vibe, is that I think they're a little loose, they're relaxed. There was a video that went, I think it was on LSU Football's Instagram story. And it was like Jace Thomas, Tradez, Green, a couple of the guys like working out, and they're like having a good time dancing. Like, this doesn't feel like a team that just lost their head coach. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
Like that's, and I'll let the fans take that wherever they want to go with that. Like, you saw the former players' reactions, you saw the lack of support from former players we talked about last week. And now you've kind of seen these players, like, it'll be interesting tomorrow night, Tuesday night, when we get to speak with them. I'm sure people are going to have some questions about Alabama, but this is the first time we're speaking to the players. And shout out Michael Bonnet. He will keep it very close to the vest and careful about who goes out there and speaks to the media the rest of the year. But tomorrow for sure. So I think they're loose. I think they're having fun. I did like the practice that Frank Wilson talked about that they had to open things off last week, where he let the guys that essentially haven't played, a bunch of walk-ons, but a lot of freshmen that haven't played, he let them get the first team reps and involved them and really made it, I think, a family thing. And so that's important. Like, if you're going to make any type of run here towards the end of the year, which is weird to talk about, if you're going to make any type of run, if you're going to win this weekend in Tuscaloosa, you got to make sure your team is close and bonded. It doesn't matter how talented you are. You can't go to Tuscaloosa completely, discombobulated. So I think that's been the point of emphasis. That's kind of the vibe around the program. And we'll see. Obviously, it's all good talking points,
Correct.
and but we'll see what happens when they take the field this Saturday.
Well, you talked about Tuscaloosa, and I don't want to harp a lot on Brian Kelly and all the firings and kind of what who the next head coach is going to be, because we have a lot of time to do that. They do have a game. It's easy to do that in a bye week when you're not preparing for a game.
Yeah.
But they do have a game this weekend. Obviously, it's against Alabama on the road. After an embarrassing loss against Texas A&M, you have 2 weeks to kind of stew over that. But what's going to be the biggest difference, in your opinion, from the conversations you've had and what you've seen at practice for the last 2 weeks going into this game? Obviously, Frank Wilson's come out and said, look, we're going to run the football a lot more. Everybody's been screaming for that. We're going to run the football a lot more. You have a new play caller in Alex Atkins. You have Whitweek still questionable. You have some guys that are still banged up.
Mm-hmm.
But he came out and announced that our starting quarterback still is Garrett Nussmeier. You have a new play caller. You have a new head man in charge. Kind of a new attitude it seems like they're trying to implement. What can we expect to see from the style of play from them this weekend?
Yeah, I think it's going to be aggressive and a little bit of why not? What do we have to lose? So I hesitate to use the word desperation, but it's I also hesitate to say do anything to win. But I was of the strong belief that even dating back to really the Ole Miss game, I don't think Brian Kelly and that staff did everything possible to win football games. That was my opinion, especially in that Ole Miss game. So now it's well, what do you have to lose? If you're Alex Atkins, if you're not going to be retained, here's your 4-game audition for an OC job somewhere.
Correct.
If you're not going to be retained, and I'm not saying he won't be or he will be, but here's your audition. There's going to be a lot of moving parts across college football. So why not put on a 4-game display with these type of players, which they have some guys, and get those guys involved? So I think it's going to be aggressive. I think that they are going to put their hand in the dirt, try to play a physical brand of football. I've been saying this for a long time. I think that this offensive line, they can have success on the ground. Now, to what extent, we'll see. But if you go back to what Alex Atkins loves to do, he is heavy counter game. So really the last time I would say he truly was in charge of play calling, I should say, was 2019 when he was with Charlotte. And you go back to that season, I watched some of their games. They ran counter all over the place against people. It was ridiculous. And they let him, that was their first bowl game appearance and stuff like that. Had a pretty successful season. He obviously gets hired by Florida State the next year. So I think you're just going to see an aggressive brand of football, and they're going to pull out all the stops. I do believe we're going to see Michael Van Buren on Saturday. Maybe that's hope. Maybe that's whatever. But, if you have a chance to go your second and goal from the 3, why not?
Oh, you see me you're talking about packages, not as in
packages.
Extended.
Not starting. I think we really will see packages for Michael Van Buren because I think Frank Wilson's goal is to inspire confidence. How do you inspire confidence? Is when your players look over the sideline and say, hey, my coach is doing everything possible to go win this football game. And I think that's what it is. That's what it's going to be. I don't know if they win. I don't know if it's close. But I think that they're going to play a little more free and a little more fast. And, maybe I don't want to say this is what they needed because no one needed what happened the past 2 weeks. But maybe they just needed the weight lifted off their shoulders a little bit, and we'll see what happens. Does it look different on Saturday?
Jared, you got one?
Yeah, speaking of the moving parts, I want to go ahead and get down to the nasty stuff, right? So we're sitting here talking about, and we're looking at a completely different landscape than what we're used to seeing in college football and the moving parts and everything that's going. Hugh Freeze was just announced as let go at Auburn, so that now becomes another opening. We're looking at 4 games left, 4 weeks left in the season, and you're seeing all these openings coming. Are we expecting this head coach search to maybe go a little quicker than what we expected maybe before the year or maybe before it actually happened? Simply because of all of these openings that seem to be coming and you don't want the opportunity for there to be that much choice, I guess, if you will?
I think they'd like to do that. I think that it's the worst kept secret that everyone wants Lane Kiffin. And if Ole Miss is playing into late December, that's going to be the biggest thing. It's if let's just play the hypothetical. If Ole Miss makes the playoff, they're playing, I guess, December 19th, 20th is the first round of the playoffs. So they don't have a bye. They're playing either a home or road game. Let's just say they win that. Well, now you're talking about a New Year's, and you might still not have a coach. And, on our message board over at the Bengal Tiger, that's been a very talked about point is if you push all your chips in for Lane Kiffin, are you willing to potentially miss out on some portal guys because you can't get everything? You're not going to have a coaching staff. And that is the difficult game to play. I have parked on, and then maybe this is just my opinion, it would be worth it to me because I think Kiffin would be the best long-term play. Now, that would it maybe sacrifice some of the opportunity you have in 2026? Maybe so. But you're not making this hire just for 1 year. You're making this hire so you don't have to make another decision like this for a long time. So that being said, Jared, I think in a perfect world, yeah, like, for example, Tulane lost to UTSA last weekend. They're going to have some crazy stuff happen to get in the playoff now. If I'm Auburn, I've called John Sumrall's agent, and I'm like, hey, let's just get this done. So on December the 8th or the 7th, that first Monday after conference championship weekend, we can make the decision. You've got your staff in tow. We're doing that. LSU, I think, wants Lane Kiffin so bad, I don't know if they can do this. Now, if you pivot off of him, you got to ask the question on the hot board. We released another one today. Like, who's not a playoff coach that you'd like to go get? My number one option, I really like Kenny Dillingham. And, like, if you went out to Arizona State and you don't think they're going to make the playoff, that's a guy you could bring in. But I just think they're going to exhaust all options to go get Kiffin. And so while they would like for it to be a short-term thing, this might go a little bit longer than they want.
So just so I can make sure I got this right, and we can make sure we heard this right from you. If you go get a Lane Kiffin, I don't know if you're able to go target and get a Dan Lanning, just somebody that lands themselves into the college football playoff. Basically, what you're saying is that from outside of completely overkicking your skis and just completely blowing it out of water in year one, you're almost sacrificing 2026.
You would sacrifice an opportunity to fully build the roster. I don't want to say you'd have to punt on 2026 because I do think with the right guy, there's an opportunity to go get. Like, if you brought in Lane Kiffin, I still think you could compete for a playoff spot next year. I just think he's that good of a coach, or Dan Lanning, to your point. The problem being, though, is that let's play that game again, if he loses on New Year's, is named the coach on January the 2nd, I can't remember the exact new portal window it is, but you are hitting the ground running. And unless he's going to bring a bunch of people from Ole Miss, or Lanning would bring a bunch of guys from Oregon, there's not a lot of that work to be done. So I don't want to say you'd punt on your playoff hopes. You would just not have the full body of work. It's like we used to talk about when coaches got fired, like, hey, he doesn't have his guys in. It'd be a balance, I think, of what he has there. But I think LSU's a place where you look at the job and, man, if you can just fix a couple of things, like, you can be a playoff team like that. Like, we're sitting here talking about LSU. They're 5-3, and I know I hate to play the what if game. If the ball bounces a couple different ways, you could be 4-4, sure, but you could also sit here with one loss and Brian Kelly's still your head coach. So all these things we're sitting here saying are obviously happenstance. But yeah, Jared, I think the best way to put it is you're not punting on the season. You just wouldn't have the full opportunity to build the roster maybe you would want to if you target one of those playoff coaches.
Well, what do you with the rule change, obviously they get an extra 15 days if your coach has been fired. So you can kind of expound upon that window a little bit, just to say, because I think everybody's confused about, like, for the listener, how the new transfer portal works. So you get
right, and you have the early signing, and then you have the early signing period, right, in December, where everybody initially everybody usually waits. No, well, the early signing period is just the first Wednesday in December or second Wednesday in December. Right. So that's where you would have to say, I mean, Frank Wilson is going to have to do it. Yeah, right. You'd have to convince him to wait. To convince him to wait. And that's going to be the hard part because these kids want guarantees. Like, I'll just say this, and it's a premium article on our site. Here's a teaser for you to go look at it. Talk with Haven Finney and his family. Elite corner out there at Sierra Canyon high school in California. He said he's had multiple conversations. His family's had multiple conversations with Corey Raymond. That's kind of where they sit. He wants to be at LSU, but he's also got to know, because he's moving his whole life across the country, to know who's going to be that coach. And from a kid's perspective, I understand that, right? Like, you want to know who your head coach is. Frank Wilson's been asked a couple of times. There might not be more pressure on an LSU staffer right now than this recruiting staff. Like, how do you manage making sure you keep kids in tow, fight the negative recruiting, and make sure these kids know what's going on? Because the worst thing you can do is guarantee something and it doesn't happen, and then that kid signs, and now you've got bad blood and bad relationships, stuff like that. So that would not be fun.
That's all while understanding, too, you're going to be the unsung hero. Because let's say you keep the class together and the new coach comes in and they go out and have one of those great years next year. You're still not going to be the one that's given the credit for keeping the class and everybody together that you were able to, even keeping the guys on campus that are still on campus. It's going to be the coach came in, put his systems in place, and that's how you went out and won. And no one's really going to talk about at that point who kept it together, who kept the ship sailing, and kind of pushed it along at that point.
The only way you get that, Jared, is if your head coach stands at the podium next December in his first playoff press conference and says, hey, we wouldn't be here without Frank Wilson,
And you know what?
Corey Raymond.
Well, if he's standing there next December and saying that, that means you've also went the kickoff of the season and you went 14 weeks without anyone really saying it at that point.
Exactly.
And you know what? The new head coach, if he's smart, he would do that if they're in that situation, right? Because
you just really hope he gets their names right.
Just let the guy live in peace, buddy. Okay, I mean, I know you're frustrated.
Dillingham can do that. He's done that. That's his big thing.
So, Bryce, let me ask you: do you really think Dillingham's not realistic's probably the right word. Do you think it's realistic that he comes this way?
Yeah, 110%.
You do.
Look. I'm going to dive into two more guys who are alum of where they are. Okay, I've already done Brent Key. I've already done Dillingham. Tomorrow I'm doing Clark Lee, and then we'll have Jeff Brom. Look, I think with Dillingham, it's really fun to sit there and say you're at your alma mater and all those things are great, and you went to the playoff last year. Maybe you did catch lightning in a bottle with Scadaboo and all those guys, whatever. But it's all fun and games until that multi-million-dollar contract is put in front of you that doubles or triples your salary, and you're competing at the highest level of the sport. You're taking in the best athletes, and you have a chance to go hoist a trophy each and every single year. Like, it's all fun and games until that conversation is had, and then it's when push comes to shove. I will just say this, and obviously we talked about this last week, like just from my connections in Atlanta, I don't think Brent Key would leave Georgia Tech. Like, I think he's one of the guys that he would just stay there. Dillingham, to me, from just talking to people, is like, he's going to entertain that. And even, last Monday, I guess it was, when Kelly was fired, The Athletic came out with an article, and his face was on the front page of it, and it said essentially, hot board or whatever you want to say, and he didn't turn it down. He just said his focus was on this team.
Right.
So I think, he's 35 years old, not a large runway of experience, but who is that you're really realistically going to get? Like, outside of Kiffin and Lanning, I don't think you realistically get Lanning, to be honest. So I really like Kenny Dillingham. I like it's not just his coaching acumen, it's his personality. Mm-hmm. He is a competitor. And by God, you need someone who is a competitor and getting fired up and not, I'll throw you a bone, Lloyd, not screaming at his coaches, but, screaming, at the referee, like fighting for his players. Yeah. And I think Dillingham fits that mold to the T. So I think he's a realistic option. I think the idea that he wouldn't leave and people just casting it off as, well, that's never going to happen. Well, why would it never happen? I mean, this is LSU. If you're an LSU fan and you think that you are as big as you are, you should be able to go to an Arizona State and take their head coach away, regardless of his ties to that place.
Let me ask you a question. So I know we want to talk about this week, but like, this is what matters. This is what we need to talk about. Mm-hmm. So you talk about all this stuff, right? Like, who else? Like, what other coaches we go after that has the experience, right? And I agree with that. Verge Osbury is making the decision. That has been publicly announced. Hey, Verge is going to be heading up this coaching hire. I want to make a couple points, and I want to have this conversation with you because I'm interested to hear your take. You're hiring the new president tomorrow. You hire the president. Verge Osbury is making the decision for the next head coach, right? He hires the guy. Does that not make you feel like Verge Osbury is going to be the athletic director? Because wouldn't an athletic director want to make the coaching hire? And if Verge Osbury was to make the coaching hire and not the athletic director and hire somebody else, wouldn't that be a point of contention? And wouldn't that guy be overlooking this guy who didn't hire and
it's the
picking it apart?
It's the cuckold theory.
Right. Like, it wasn't his hire, all this type of stuff. And second part to this question, and if Verge Osbury is making the hire, wouldn't you think Marcus Freeman would get some serious consideration? I personally think it's hard to go back to Notre Dame and go get the second guy and try that again. But I know Verge and him have a really good relationship. Like, is that a possibility?
Man, if we're being real, 5 years ago, no one would have told you Brian Kelly was going to LSU. So, yeah, anything's a possibility, right? Like, I mean, that's to that point. Yeah, anything is. I'll tell you one thing. I don't know if this is unpopular. I I'd love Marcus Freeman to be my head
I would
coach if I was a
too.
fan of the team. Like, night and day difference between him and Brian Kelly.
Right.
Go back and watch. And Lloyd, I don't know if you have time to do this right now, but I'll have to send it to you. Maybe you can show it later in the show or something. When there's a team meeting, I think it's more like a team run, so it's like winter workouts. And the team's talking with an assistant coach or someone, I don't know, chaplain, I don't know who it is, and at Notre Dame, and they said, hey, you know, we're gonna do this team run, we're gonna build all this, and before we do that, we want to introduce you to your new head coach here at Notre Dame. And Marcus Freeman comes out of the door, and those guys go ballistic, and he's dapping them up, and probably did the team run with him because he's in ridiculous shape out there. But it's just one of those things where, like, they love that dude. You need, like, I want that. I want a guy that, you know, gets down there with the guys and does that and loves them, and you can just tell that everybody's on the same page. So to that point, yeah, I mean, maybe. But going back to the Verge-Osbury thing, it is a weird thing. I've got a lot of questions about that. You know, in terms of, you know, hey, and these are from, you know, family members and fans and friends that are they know who LSU is, but they've just been taken aback by this whole political influence thing that's been happening over the past week. You would think, logically, what you just said, Mikey, makes a ton of sense.
Right.
I don't think logic is in this situation, frankly.
Welcome to Louisiana.
I don't know if it does. I don't know if it will matter. And I think it would be weird to say the athletic director would be held, the new one, if it's not Verge-Osbury, would be held hostage by a decision he didn't make.
Correct.
That's very weird to say. It doesn't sound like that's true alignment. Like, people love to use that word this time of year. But maybe that is what happens, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, and maybe we're all sitting here in 3 years from now saying, God, that was such a god-awful decision by the decision makers. Why would you ever do that? Because it's so obvious. But I don't think it necessarily means that Verge-Osbury is going to be the athletic director. I don't think it's in stone. I wouldn't put it in Sharpie. It wouldn't surprise me if he was, but we'll see what happens. I don't know, because this new president, when they name it tomorrow, there's a lot of speculation about who it is.
I think everybody knows who it is. I feel like that's been the last 6 months.
Yeah, and if that person brings the person that he's working with currently, you know, over here, I don't know. That's above my pay grade in terms of the administration searches, in terms of stuff like that. But as we kind of sit here on, you know, November the 3rd, I would say anything would shock me if Verge-Osbury was the athletic director. But I don't see it happening. I don't know if it matters, and maybe it should. So I know that's probably not a good answer, but that's kind of where I sit, because I really don't know.
Yeah, if you thought,
can I expound off of this too, just to kind of throw it another angle, and maybe you can.
Yeah, what kind of lights you got going on in there? Is there a, you know, you
got a party in here. I got a party in here. Don't worry about it. You know, we're doing things. I just walk over here, and, you know, we get the party going. No big deal. We do things like that over here. Listen, if let's just say too, like, obviously it's a very weird time in terms of not having someone sitting in that seat, and you have a firing going on, but you're also in the middle of football season, and you're trying to get to the next stage. Could a lot of that be in terms of the Verge situation is, look, we literally just can't sit here and not have someone act and hold the seat and make the outreach and do the things that need to be done to cover those bases, and obviously maybe even get to the actual hiring date while not having someone? Because if you're LSU and you're sitting down and you don't have that going on right now, or 2 weeks from now, or a month from now, who's taking you serious when you finally make the call to get the job?
Oh, it's a great point. You can't, and correct me if I'm wrong with what you're saying here, but you can't just sit on your laurels and just think, okay, we're just going to wait. Like, that's not an option for anybody. So, yeah, to your point, you know who might be the best person in the best position? It might be Verge-Osbury. Like, because either you're going to really impress this new president, and really impress the brass with your decision making, and you find yourself as the LSU athletic director, or, and I'm not saying he would leave, but you're going to position yourself for some type of opportunity in a higher capacity, whether they bring in a new AD or not. So I think he's almost in a win-win situation, and probably the only person in that role during this entire process. So I think there's that too, and I'll add this too. Can't remember if I spoke on this last week, but we're seeing across college football, GMs play a much bigger role in decision-making. Specifically, I remember, I guess it was last summer, when Andrew Luck took the Stanford job. Now, Stanford is not even on the same stratosphere in terms of what we're talking about with LSU, but Andrew Luck has essentially been handed the reins to make decisions for that football program, much like the NFL hierarchy, right? Your AD is kind of your owner; they're involved, but not kind of. And then your GM is the one making decisions, from personnel to players and stuff like that. I'm interested to see Austin Thomas's role in all this. He wasn't listed on that committee, Jared, but I guarantee you he's playing a role. So to add to that, what if Austin Thomas, who's driven a lot of the success that you've had in terms of player accumulation and talent accumulation, what if he's impressed by Verge Osbury? And that working relationship's really beneficial. And Frank Wilson is. Verge has a really good opportunity to impress the right people here. And like I said, he's in a win-win because you couldn't just wait. You weren't going to say, well, we're not going to start our search until after the president starts. Or, well, then don't field a team in 2026. Let's just punt on the year, really. Don't play and wait till 2027. So, yeah, it has to be done. And that's why I do think Verge is in a win-win spot here for him.
Yeah. Bryce, I know you got to go, but I agree with you on the Verge thing. And look, if LSU wants somebody that believes in LSU and wants LSU to do well and wants to make the best decision for LSU, he's a pretty good guy for it. I mean, I think he's proven that his loyalty here and he loves it here, and he wants the best for LSU. So we'll see how that turns out if he ends up being the guy. But you have to know that he's going to go out there and pick the guy that he feels is best for LSU as far as culture, as far as coaching goes, as far as being able to have success here. So I trust Verge. I do. I like Verge. I think he'd make a good decision and hope for the best for him. But we appreciate you, dude. I know you got to run.
Yes, sir.
We'll have you again on. We'll have you on next Monday, talking about what the hell happens this weekend. I have no clue. But
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm just there for the vibes. I'm going to Tuscaloosa to enjoy a football game.
Love it. There you go.
That's what we're going there for.
There you go. All right,
Appreciate
brother.
you, fellas.
Have a
Thanks.
good night. Yep. This Verge